What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Lead Houston, where it's all Houston all the time. Today, I've got a very special guest, Joe DeLeone. How are you doing, my guy? We had you last year. It's about time we come back around and do it one more time.
I'm doing pretty good. As we were just talking about, it's a nutty month of April. There's so many different things happening. There's so much information to keep up with, and of course, having so many awesome conversations with hosts like yourself. And couldn't be more juiced up for the draft to be coming around in what's not that long away in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's been pretty hectic over here as well too, with scheduling. Just had a very esteemed Jordan Reed yesterday
Mm.
on the YouTube channel from ESPN. So we'll get to have some of your answers kind of reflect off of his, and then we'll get into some Houston Texans right now. First off, Joe, uh, the Texans, well, they had themselves a very hyped up offseason 2 years ago, going into the 2024 season. They were one of the more underrated teams that people were talking about for the Super Bowl. And obviously, the end result is been the end result for a lot of us Texans fans, not just with D'Amico Ryans, but years prior. The L in the divisional round continues, and it's
Mm.
something we want to stop before it continues to trend with a new head coach and a new crew. What were your thoughts on the 24 season for the Houston Texans?
Yeah, I thought that as you've described it, it's a lot of disappointment because the expectations were super high. And from what I've read about the Texans this offseason, it sounds like there were a lot of behind the scenes issues, things that were happening in the locker room, lack of chemistry with the offensive line, with Ben Silk, the offensive coordinator. There's going to be a lot of new faces. I think that right now, and this kind of like leads into what the expectations are for the draft. I thought that like as soon as I watched that divisional game and watched any primetime Texans games this year, and anytime I got to watch them, it was, man, if they had a better offensive line, I feel like CJ Stroud would be able to take that next step. But he was really held back by not having enough protection. And it came full head with the way that they played against the Chiefs and the amount of pressure that CJ Stroud faced. And I feel like I'm incredibly disappointed in the Texans and the way that they handled this free agency period. I understand that you're trying to completely hit a hard reset with the group. And if you don't feel like Laramie Tunsil was going to be able to get you the results that you were looking for, why they traded him away, I think that you needed to have strong contingency plans in place where they currently sit, which again, we're probably going to end up digging into for needs. They weren't as aggressive as they should have been if they were going to start moving guys around. Instead, we're looking at a pretty sketchy group that I don't know if they're going to be able to protect CJ Stroud. And if anything, I think they're going to be potentially worse if they don't have a great draft.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment. There's a lot of fans here that resemble the same feel here.
Mm.
The pulse is similar there when it comes to the offensive line room. Yeah, did they trade up? They traded away Laramie Tunsil, and there was a great conversation to have about that. But whether or not at the end of the day he was a top 5 left tackle in the NFL, arguably top 3 in terms of pass protection. So definitely one of the better left tackles. Texans traded him away. Now, intangible stuff like that doesn't get talked about. We can continue to sweep it under the rug as much as we want, but ultimately, when I look at D'Amico Ryans and from what he comes with as 49ers, he's trying to recreate the swarm mentality. Is something he always talks about, is the swarm, special work ethic and relentless mindset. And when you look at the 2024 Texans, the defense was all about that swarm mentality.
Mm.
But on the offensive side of the ball, as many fans continue to say, it just wasn't anything swarmy about the offense, especially when you look at different clips of games and you see CJ Stroud getting hit by defenses and there's no old lineman to pick him up. It's little things like that where you start going, and it's not just once or twice. Okay, it starts becoming a trend in some games where you're going, the Packers game, and he gets walloped right near the sidelines. Jair Alexander's over there chirping. The linebacker just knocked him down. CJ Stroud's fighting for himself, and you're going, where's the rest of the offensive line group? Because
Yeah.
those are the guys that are they're like a pack of wolves, man. You take out someone and now, oh no, not my boy. I mean, you've played football before. There's a sense of camaraderie that just felt like it. And I hate to say that it wasn't there because I'm not in the locker room. Obviously it was, considering there's multiple reports here locally, but there was something, just that Rubik's Cube was just not going the right way for the Texans offense last year.
Yeah, and it's funny to like compare the defense to the offense because you just mentioned there that like this group of defenders, there's some premier talented guys in terms of Derek Stingley and Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, but the rest of the group, they were able to maximize the results from players that weren't highly drafted guys and free agents that they brought in across the board. I have no worries about the defense. I feel like this Texans defense is going to continue to get stronger and more stout as some of the young guys start to age that they drafted last year, that Kamari Lassiter and Kalen Bullock that had strong contributions. But you're right. I think that the way that just the tone of the offensive line did not meet what it needed to. And you talked about like that specific example that you should be scrapping out. And if guys are getting hit late or whatever it is, you should be rallying around your teammates. The rest of this team is great. I mean, like at receiver, they've got talent. Their running back room is very stout. It's very underrated. And we all know that CJ Stroud has the capability of becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He already did it as a rookie, and he's shown that ability despite being pressured to survive and to succeed despite all of that, that onslaught that he sees from opposing defenses. But right now, priority number one has to be building up this offensive line. And I think that the current group just overall doesn't cut it. They need to find players that are going to put pressure on the current starters and some eventual starters that can step in early on.
And then I think a lot of fans, including myself, like, I guess to combat that point is the hiring of Nick Caley. There's so much hope around it that you're hoping, because Bobby Slowick was a guy that relied heavily on the center, that was the prototypical guy for setting up the rest of his offense because he's calling out the mic, he's doing all kinds of protection sets. Whereas now Nick Caley is going to throw those responsibilities to CJ Stroud. And now, okay, so that's less pressure on someone like Drew Scruggs, who did not perform up to suit this previous year, ended up getting replaced by Jarrett Patterson, ended up getting moved to guard. Now they're kind of wondering, is he a center? Is he a guard? Nick Caserio has talked about him before, someone who drafted him, traded up for him, and said that he sees him more as a center. The hope around this fan base is that with Nick Caley, with some of that Rams tree offense, that is always a good offense to pull from. Anything Sean McVay's fantastic. We love it. But the hope is that, okay, the ball gets out of CJ Stroud's hands faster, and there's ways to circumvent around a bad offensive line. My only thing is that substantial for 17 games in the NFL?
Right. I don't think it's sustainable. I think that like that is going to help you survive some games. But when you have to live in this world with play calling to work around poor offensive line play, it's not going to last. And eventually it is going to collapse. Your whole offense is going to collapse at a certain point. Any time that we talk about successful teams, they're successful in the trenches. Anyone who wants to disagree with that, I don't like. They don't know enough about football if they disagree with that sentiment. The teams with the best offensive and defensive lines historically have gone on to win Super Bowls. Maybe teams that have had poor offensive line play have reached the Super Bowl, but like the easiest, best example is back when the Chiefs faced off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl, and their offensive line got more and more banged up every single week, and they had to rely on guys that playing out of position and backup stepping in. And that also even happened this last Super Bowl for them. And the times that they've played their worst is when their offensive line was a huge weakness. If you have a weakness like that is so significant along your O-line or D-line, it is going to get called out and it is going to get picked apart in the biggest matchups. That is what will end your season. It's what ended their season this past year against the Chiefs, because they were actually facing an elite team in a very difficult matchup with a very elite defensive coordinator. The best coaches that go on these playoff runs know how to exploit poor offensive line play. So I think that the rest of this roster is enough of a bright light that they need to acknowledge and stare down and say, you know what, we need to find some better players that are going to be more consistent and reliable that can maybe challenge the current starting unit.
And I think if anybody finds out in the first few minutes listening to this episode, the Houston Texans need some offensive linemen. That's definitely one of the needs going into the 2025 NFL draft. What other needs are you looking at for this Houston Texans team?
Yeah, I think that later on in the draft, adding another receiver is worth considering. I know that they just traded for Christian Kirk, but with the inconsistent availability of Tank Dell, I think that it would behoove them to draft somebody as just an additional depth piece. This receiver room is quality, and we know that Nico Collins is a tremendous player, but when Tank Dell goes down, you do need that next man up. You need that next guy that you can turn to. I also think that you need somebody to back up Joe Mixon at running back and then eventually maybe take over the lion's share of carries. Thankfully for the Texans, this is a very deep running back class, so they're going to be completely fine. And then I would also throw in there, it wouldn't hurt them to bolster their linebacker room, even though they did sign EJ Speed. I think one that we talked about last year, and I've talked about with a couple other Houston Texans shows that I've gone on, they need to get some more defensive linemen, some interior defensive linemen, some big bodies, some space eaters. Sheldon Rankins is a great player, but somebody to go alongside him, I think, is important for them to bring into the fold that would really help ascend Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson's production this upcoming season. Again, thankfully for them, that is another position group in this draft class that you could almost double dip with the amount of quality defensive linemen that will be available for all 7 rounds.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of fans share the same resentment. Seem to share. Excuse me, something just popped up on my computer. Okay.
Okay.
I think a lot of fans share the same resent there with all of the positions that you named. I mean, the main three that everyone continues to name is offensive line, interior defensive line, and wide receiver. Those are the three main ones for the Texans there. All right, so we've spent so much time on offensive line. We're going to continue spending more time on it because the Texans need some. 25 is the pick for the Texans. We obviously know they have 4 picks within the top 100, 25, 58, 79, and 89. The Texans need some offensive linemen. Who do you got in mind that could fit for this team?
First of all, I really think that the Texans should strongly consider trading up to actually go and get an offensive lineman, because if they wait at 25, there's a really strong chance that most of the good offensive linemen are going to be gone off the board because there is a scarcity of good offensive linemen in this class. And I think a lot of teams are going to be panicked and worried that they're going to miss out on their shots. But the first one, and one that's commonly mocked, is Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Just did a film breakdown, or a scouting report episode rather, on him on the A to Z Sports Film Room channel for anyone who wants to check it out. But he had some of the best tape out of any of the offensive linemen before he went down with a season-ending injury early on in the year. Super fluid, easy moving, has a really strong upper body, just so great in pass protection. The type of guy that needs to be plugged in at left tackle, and then you just don't even need to worry about him once he's back to full health. And then outside of that, in the first round, I'm a really big Tyler Booker fan. If you drafted him to play guard and compete with Juice Scruggs and then eventually take over that starting spot, his anchor is phenomenal. He mirrors in pass protection so well, and he has been lauded as one of the most high character leaders in this entire draft class. If you talk to anybody who has known Tyler Booker when he was coming into Alabama, that has been the number one thing, in addition to his technique and his attention to detail. So with any questions about how this offensive line room currently is with the character of the group, I think that Tyler Booker should be a priority name to pay attention to.
The two you named right there, Josh Simmons, are you not worried about the injury? I know he looked fantastic at his pro day, given 5 months since the torn patellar tendon. But we do know there is definitely a history with this injury in terms of knocking down NFL players' careers. Now he's super young, obviously, compared to these other guys that have had a torn patellar injury. I guess no worry there for Josh Simmons.
No, not necessarily. And I know that when you have lower body injuries for offensive linemen, it does generate concern. The one injury that like I get immediately like, nope, this is going to be a problem is when guys have Achilles injuries. I feel like that the recovery timeline for Achilles injuries is brutal. Like Seth McLaughlin, who's his teammate, is somebody who I'd be very worried about. And I think is going to impact his draft stock because there's just a very poor track record for recovery for that. But I think that for the patellar injury, not being a doctor, just feeling that he's got all of this time to recover and to return, and you don't need to necessarily like truly rush him out there. This is an answer for your offensive line for the next, hopefully 5 to 10 years, not a quick answer just in the next one season. This is hopefully an investment that lasts a long time.
And then with the Tyler Booker idea, I didn't get to actually have that conversation with Jordan Reed. I know he mentioned him as somebody that he is highly after as well for the Houston Texans to go ahead and get if he is available at 25. But he did mention Tyler Booker as somebody being a bully in the phone booth kind of guy and really good in short area, film and everything. So my question for you is, Tyler Booker, he's very good in short area quickness, good feet, all that stuff. But he did mention when, if you start making the game longer for him, where you start moving him out of that, how many times are you actually in a phone booth per se?
Yeah, I understand that like question of like how is he going to succeed if you need him getting moving in space and you want to get him
Mm-hmm.
out in like the screen game. I just don't think that like that's his skill set. I think that not every single offensive lineman needs to be a fluid free mover that you're getting downhill. I think on film he does a fine job. I think that if you allow him to pick up a head of steam, he's also going to really clock guys and try to blow them up. But I'm not particularly worried about that because he excels so much in close quarters. And I'd much rather invest in a guy that has the technique and the consistency and also the fluidity at his size to be a really good pass protector, and then the leg drive to be a really good run blocker.
Okay, then we go to the opposite side of the trenches, the interior defensive line. Uh, and I've been pounding on the table. It seems like for an interior defensive lineman for quite some years for the Texans. I really wanted Jerzon Newton coming out last year. Ended up going to the Commanders. I really wanted Jordan Davis a few years before, and we ended up trading down and getting Kenyon Green. That worked out pretty nicely for us, huh? So yeah, I've been banging on the table for a defensive lineman. I combat a lot of Texans fans with the idea of actually drafting a D lineman at 25. What is your perspective at 25, and should it even be a D lineman?
I think it's certainly worth considering if you miss out on any of those offensive linemen that we just talked about. And like Armand Membao and Will Campbell are going to be off the board. They're not even going to be available at that point. But if you're sitting there at 25, you can't trade up and you've kind of missed out on that opportunity. I think it's certainly worth considering getting a Kenneth Grant from Michigan, who is just a mauling presence, who's got some upside of potentially being a productive pass rusher. He reminds me of Dexter Lawrence, a heavier version of Dexter Lawrence, which is crazy to think about. Or Derek Harmon, the Oregon offensive lineman, who's tall, long, can play multiple roles, is not just confined to being a one tech in this defense. But I would actually say that it's probably better to wait because there's just so much depth at defensive line. You can get guys in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth round that can go on a start on your defense because this defensive tackle group is so deep. And I would consider for the Texans' needs a guy like Alfred Collins from Texas, who is immovable against the run. I really like Shamar Turner from Texas A&M, who flashes some really good athleticism. Joshua Farmer from Florida State is a guy that I really like that is super underrated and has some really great hands. And then to go even further for some day three guys, two guys that are just phenomenal space eaters. Jordan Phillips is somebody who is just got this super wide, muscular back who is so hard to move off the spot, along with Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, who was super underrated this year that just didn't get a lot of shine because so much focus went to his teammates.
It's funny. I was starting to smile there when you were naming off prospects because the 4 out of the 6 or 7 guys you named, all of them have met with the Houston Texans. Kenneth
For a
Grant,
reason.
Josh
For a
Farmer,
reason.
like Shamar Turner, like, and or did you say Shamar Stewart? I get
Shamar Turner, his teammate. There's two
yeah,
Shamars. I know it's very
yeah,
confusing. There's two Shamars on the Texas A&M team. I mix them up
yeah,
stupidly sometimes, but yeah,
yeah.
it's Shamar Turner's is
I'm
the
a
interior
I am
defensive
a
lineman.
Definitely. I am a fan of Shamar Turner. I understand he committed a lot of penalties for Texas A&M. Some people say hothead. I say swarm. I say he's a swarmy individual with D'Amico Ryans.
Hell yeah.
So wide receiver is the next one on the team needs. Who do you got in terms of a few guys that maybe even if the Texans looked at 25, if they wanted to see if maybe somebody fell, or do they wait into day 2, day 3 for a wide receiver?
Yeah, I've got two guys that make sense at 25. Matthew Golden from Texas, who he fits the I think he's going to be really successful because in the NFL because he's really balanced and he's not so much ever going to ascend into being like a premier number one receiver, but that's not what the Texans need. They need somebody to play off of Nico Collins. Matthew Golden is your prototypical Z, good route runner, deceptively fast, ran the fastest 40 time for a wide receiver, and his super reliable hands. I also really like Jalen Knoll from Iowa State, who is a compact slot guy who's got really good footwork, is just really physical through contact. Reminds me a lot of Steve Smith, the former Panthers receiver. And then if we were like just to look at some later options for like another slot guy, Jalen Royals from Utah State is a name to pay attention to. He's just super smooth and fluid as a route runner and has not gotten enough love as he should have. That could be available somewhere in the 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th round, but probably will go a little bit earlier than that.
It's unfortunate, but Jalen Royals will not be a Houston Texan. The reason why I know, unfortunately, when I look at Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, their draft picks have all been Power 5 conference guys, guys that have been captains, Power 5 guys, some sort of big time recruits in high school. They kind of like that terminology too. 5-star recruits out of high school. There's a trend setting with Nick Caserio, especially Nick, but even now more with D'Amico Ryans. And we always saw a little trend with the Patriots and Alabama players. It's the same way it feels like here with Houston. So we got a few guys right there. O-line, interior D-line, wide receiver. Those are some of the ones that we knocked out as the main team needs for the Houston Texans. Is there any guys that you're going, man, this guy, he'd be perfect on the Houston Texans? Or who is it? Who is it? Because fans are searching for names out there.
Yeah, knowing the current needs for him, we talked so much about the offensive line needs and whatnot, and what you just talked about, the coveting of blue chip prospects that come from premier programs. I'm going to go with Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, the interior offensive lineman, who when injuries happened and Josh Simmons went down, he bumped out to left tackle. But he was once a 5-star recruit, and he fits the billing of being a former 5-star recruit. He's just so steady. He's so reliable. I think that you need more reliability rather than that super high-end upside if you're the Texans. You just need guys that you can count on. You don't need Donovan Jackson to go on to become a future, consistent all-pro. You just need Donovan Jackson to maybe have a couple of Pro Bowl seasons as a second-round pick and somebody that you can always count on to play a good game and to be like a top 10 guard in the NFL and to always just be counted on. I think that Donovan Jackson has longevity built into him. Maybe he has the build of like being a guy that is just going to be super underrated throughout his career that doesn't get enough love because he does everything right. So we don't call his name enough. It's just how offensive linemen work. And I think that Donovan Jackson could fit that for him.
Yeah, Texans fans are familiar with underrated offensive linemen. Some of our best offensive lines were Chris Myers, Wade Smith, Mike Brizell, Pro Bowler, Wade Smith, Pro Bowler, Chris Myers, Pro Bowler. Shout out to them. We'd love to get back to that time again here in Houston. Keeping CJ Stroud upright is the definitely the way to go for this draft, in my opinion, as well as many others have agreed as well too. We're about to wrap up, Joe, but before I let you go, I can't let you leave before you give your March Madness predictions. You already know what it is. We got my team, the Houston Cougars, whose house, playing the best team in the nation, the Duke Blue Devils. I am ready. Joe, go ahead and break my heart.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I gave out my betting picks for the Sports Geek today, so I do betting content as well. I started doing that recently, and sadly, I gave out betting on Duke to cover that 5 point spread, or I think it might be 5.5 right now. And I think that they're going to end up squaring off with Florida, and I think Duke's going to end up winning. Duke just feels unstoppable at this point. I think this Houston team's been really fun to watch, and I love the way that Kelvin Sampson's squad has just been so freaking dominant on defense. But yeah, no, I got to go with Cooper Flag and the guys. I know it's so cliche to always pick Duke, but they have been like insane to see the NBA talent that they have on that squad.
Yeah, Jordan Reed mentioned Cooper Flag, but Con Canupple as well, and well, what's his name? Kamen Maluachi, the 7-2 Sudan center. That
Yeah,
dude is just that guy's a freak, man. He's fun to watch.
absolutely.
Jordan Reed also had Duke University winning, but he
Ooh.
has a little Houston bias in his veins. So I tried to sway him over. It just wasn't enough. I understand Duke's the best team in college basketball for I would say the majority of the year, if not the whole year. And everybody knew if as long as Cooper Flag was healthy with the injury scare that they were going to be in this position. But I'm going to pick my Houston Cougars. I am not going to doubt my Cougs, man.
As you should.
I'm riding with them, man. I am a Houston sports fan till the day I die. So, Joe, I do appreciate you coming on, man. If you got any exiting thoughts, anything you want to plug, now is the time.
Yeah, be sure to check me out on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, and then go to the A to Z Sports Film Room channel. Me and my co-host Ryan Roberts, we're doing a lot of fantastic work. We just dropped our quarterback rankings, running back rankings is coming soon, and this upcoming week we're just doing position rankings videos. So if you need to know who are the best top 10 players at each position, we're filling you in. Go check that out. A to Z Sports Film Room channel. Harley, it was great getting to catch up with you. This was awesome getting to chat. And I'm very excited to see what the Texans do.
Yeah, me too, man. I appreciate you coming on and making some time for me. So y'all already know, everybody. Y'all know what to do, man. It's always, as always, go Astros, go Rockets, go Texans. You have a blessed day.